So, hello everyone. I am Mark Scherer, also known as Dereuromark, and I have been using CakePHP for a very long time. I'm a core developer, sometimes more, sometimes less. And yeah, this is basically my first time actually doing video tutorials. So we'll see how it goes, how I manage, and if this is useful or not to people. Feedback welcome. So today, in this first video tutorial, I want to go and show CakePHP 5.x as a fresh installation in application skeleton out of the box, and together with DDEV, which is a Docker-based container tool to quickly spin up a local environment as a server to run your application on. We will also look into the IdeHelper and how it can directly from the start help us to develop. And I can showcase some of the useful tips and tricks as well as some local tools that I find quite useful and that I'm usually applying to almost all of my apps out of the box. All right, so then let's get started. If you want to follow along, this will be a branch on an application skeleton that you can look at later on. I'm going to use the CakePHP app repository on my domain, and this is basically a fresh CakePHP 5.x, right now 5.1 version, and it just has Bootstrap flavor on top of it by design. So I can use the Bootstrap grid system, some of those things that are in those CSS styles. And this fork also comes with a code sniffer directly included as an enhanced version. I will showcase this later. It has the IdeHelper and PHP stand already out of the box, ready and set up. And it has some composer scripts that can download all the assets necessary, including some font awesome icons that usually are nice to show instead of edit, add, view, and delete links, texts, just using them as short icons. Yeah. So we're gonna really start fresh. So this is an empty skeleton, no database, no nothing. Everything is completely not existing yet. So you can download this either with HTTPS or SSH. So either way you can grab this code. You can download it. I prepared an empty folder for that, as you can see, and I CD'd into that folder, so it's completely empty. I'm going to git clone this repository because I want to push later the changes as a demo branch. For you, if you clone or if you copy it downwards, usually you don't want to clone this unless you want to make a bug fix or provide some changes to my branch. So now you can see that there is a CakePHP app folder. I'm going to go into it, and it contains the basic structure as well as a DDEV file. Let's open up in an IDE so that we can see what's going on in there. So, all right, so we have a DDEV folder here by default, and that one is just set to a plain PHP 8.2 Nginx setup, quite default on everything, and it has a hook to automatically install the app local file. I think Composer install would also do that, so it's probably not necessary. But it just showcases that you can add certain things to execute when you want to first time get this thing up and ready and running. So for our case now, we can directly go to DDEV and start this. If you have any questions about DDEV, on my blog, Dereuromark.de, I posted about it recently, how simple it is to get it up and running for your applications. I think CakeDC did something similar, and there are also other resources available for CakePHP. The nice thing about DDEV is that it pretty much comes out of the box for support for CakePHP. And we want to just use this first command, DDEV start. DDEV start. What it does is it uses this config file that we just saw in here, and nothing else is needed. It should directly create this application from this file here. So only a few lines, and everything will be generated from this and will be automatically up and running. It copied, like we said, the app local example, and in here we already know the default DDEV things for the local environment. So database is DB, password, username, everything is DB, and so this should be directly created as an app local file, and everything should be up and running afterwards. So let's see. All right, I think it's done. DDEV describe is pretty nice to just have an overview. You can see there is also mail pit on top of it already for your mails to be captured. You see the URL for the web, so we can click on that. So we know that there is no composer yet, and that was kind of expected. We do want to have a composer install running first. You can also do that inside, of course, but I have PHP locally, so it works either way. It's cleaner to do it inside because then the PHP version is matching. Yeah, so everything is green, everything is set up. You can see that I didn't need to do any specific issues, addressing any issues about HTTPS. So it directly, because of the DDEV site, has a valid certificate. So most people know this, like you have to click on the yeah, I accept or I ignore these warnings and I continue. Here we have no warnings, so that's also nice, directly working out of the box. Some other useful commands is DDEV SSH. So I will open a second tab here on the side, DDEV SSH. And with that, we are inside now. So inside of the container. And here we can natively run anything we want with the right user already, by the way. So bin cake. Well, I'm not sure if that's the right user, probably data will be, but it's fine for now. So here we can see all the commands available. Bake, of course. We have the Bootstrap UI plugin installed to have the grid and the form template to put out the correct stuff. We have core and debug kit, as well as the IdeHelper and migrations plugin, of course. If we want to look into how the database looks, here we can usually do DDEV PHP admin. But since it's not installed, it asks us if it wants to install it. So we can either go the manual way, which would be, let me see if it's in here. Yeah, PHP admin. So we can either do it manually using DDEV get dev PHP admin and then restart. But we can also, if it already says to us, we can do this in one step. Just let it do for us. So PHP admin is pretty useful as an add-on because it allows us to directly have a visible PHP MySQL database running. Let's see if we find. Yeah, it's almost there. It shouldn't be too long. We got kicked out here, by the way. So because of the restart, so we can go in here again as well. I will make it a bit bigger just so that we can see a full screen. So. Okay, here we can go back in, and here DDEV describe. Maybe it needs a bit of a different setup. Yeah, this way we see everything. PHP admin is okay, and it's up and running. So if we go to that URL directly from this overview, you can see that there is a database called DB and test. These are the two we used. Testing uses the test database connection to not mess up the real database, and the database itself apparently already ran the migrations, and so there is a things log already in here, but otherwise it's completely empty. So if we go back to this, and inside we do bin cake migrations status, it will tell us there's nothing available, but you can create one. In general, we do want to usually start from the database in a rapid application development process. So we have some kind of database backend structure, articles, posts, products, something like that. And then from there on, we build everything. So oftentimes you can bake migration. If you know how to use it, you can, from the help, you can see that you can add fields with a type already using the colon syntax. You can create all these things, but sometimes maybe you're just already copy pasting something over that exists somewhere else. If you have an existing articles table, so sometimes it's just fine to just create some kind of migration as a blank file that you can quickly fill up. What I usually do, I like to prefix them with migration, because if you just call it something like articles or something else, due to the missing namespace, this can have conflicts across different plugins as well as applications. So any plugin would have migration plugin name in it, articles and so on. So for me at least, this avoids that there is conflicts between the migration files from all of those different namespaces. And it creates now this first init articles. If we go in, you can see here it created it, but it didn't version it. So here we are. And here we can say this table, and we can give it a table name, articles, add column. Maybe it is a title. Usually then string. And then null false, because yeah, it needs to be set for sure. You can set all kind of different fields. So already did that for me. Interesting. AI knows that there usually can be a content to articles. Maybe we can create a created timestamp. Yep. Also usually null false, because it's going to be added right on time at the beginning. And sometimes you want to have a modified field. So we also have a modified fields. And then at the end we say create. So here we have our articles structure. A publish date can be added, a status field. Maybe it's hidden because it's in review or whatever. So there can be many things that we can add. For now, for our demo purposes, this is just fine because we can add that later. And we want to check our migration status again. It's down, and we can migrate. Oh, my bad. I wanted to call this modified, right? Good. But it didn't migrate then because it failed. So migrate. And now if you look, it's okay, it's done. And if you go to the database, we can see that there is articles. Oh, my bad. I called that capital A. Ha. Okay, we don't want that, of course. I probably used the class name instead of the actual name. We used a migration that is changed. So yeah, it uses a change. So we should easily be able to fix that by using rollback. Which removes the table. Yeah, it's gone. And then we can fix it up to what we want it to be. Articles. Yeah, so we can even add more fields now if we feel like it. Let's migrate again. Okay. This time it's in that form we expect. Yeah. You notice that it adds automatically in primary key integer 11 as an auto increment. This is very much recommended. Every table should have always a primary key ID. I don't usually use composite keys because it also makes working with them more difficult. And some tools don't even support them. So in general, it's always nice to have a primary key. It basically needs no data. It's very, very slim. I don't use UIDs because it's very, very bad for performance. If you want to expose them through a more encrypted kind of key, you can use the UUIDs as an additional field on top and expose them like that. So if you don't specify anything else, it will automatically use a primary key in those migration files. Now let's bake something. So bin cake bake all, and it tells us that there is articles available. So let's do that. It bakes us the whole structure that we can use. And now if we go to our application and go to articles, we can see that there are already everything like those tables and buttons available to add a demo 1 content. Yeah. So let's look into the IdeHelper and what it can help us to actually continue on the development path. So if we, for example, want to add a field into it, which would be a status field of sorts, you can create a new migration file. Cake bake migration article status field or something, which then this table, you see that it doesn't autocomplete yet. So there's no autocomplete at this point. Oops. What we want to do is we want to make sure that whenever we added a database table or we modified any of the basics, like adding a plugin, we actually run the update for the IDE so that it can already use all the autocomplete available. In our composer.json, you know, the require and require defs blocks, oftentimes you use a scripts block to have shortcuts available for useful things. So most of the time you would use a CS check and CS fix for the code sniffing. Yeah, so if we run that here, composer CS check, CS fix, CS check. So it fixed whatever issues were there. Everything is fixed. We can do a composer scan. It's just much quicker than typing vendor bin php scan analyze and so on. You don't have to remember the details basically. You just, I think even composer st should work because it, no? Okay, well, I thought it would have, because of status. Okay, so you definitely need that. But by CS fix, you saw that only C and F is sufficient. You don't have to type the whole thing as long as it's very unique. Composer test is also available to test the whole application. And what I use here now is setup. Composer setup. Yeah, maybe another shortcut here. I aliased C in my bash aliases to just, as a composer to just C, so I don't have to type composer. I can just type C, much easier. So composer setup is a shortcut for BinCake, IdeHelper, generate code completion, and generate PHP Storm, which creates those meta files. So if we run that, oh, of course I can't do that outside because it requires database connection. So I need to do that inside of the here. So composer. So, yeah. And now if we look into the meta storm, you see that this has been modified. We can also look into what exactly it did. So it added the article model to certain things. So all of the table data around articles have been added to different commands available. Also the routes exist now for all kinds of things. And now if I go back here and say this table, it will automatically give us the articles table because it now knows what kind of tables are available. So if we talk about modifying an existing table, you can shortcut here. It already had from before, if you noticed, shortcuts on the, wait, this table articles, my bad. So change column or add column, whatever we want to do. In this case, maybe we want to add a column status. And here it already has autocomplete from our IdeHelper from before. And in our case, we want to add a tiny integer, it's called here. So it's really nice that you have the autocomplete because if you type tiny int, it would not map it. It clearly has to be tiny integer. So that's pretty fancy. And we know that it should be null false because the default will just be 0, and 0 means everything is fine or something, and 1 could be that it's hidden. Yeah, so you can define that later with enums and a specific mapping of integer backed enums. For now, we'll just demonstrate how you can add the autocomplete. So if we go into our migrations, there is a second migration, and if we migrate, oh, did I forget? Yeah, it forgot to actually update. So it actually did that. Interesting. So if we migrate now, I think it didn't do anything because I forgot it. Let's look into the database. It's cool to have the database available. Yeah. So I kind of screwed up by executing it before it actually could do it. So the migration was marked as migrated, but it didn't happen. There are two ways to fix this. So either you go into this one, you empty it, you roll back, and then you run it again with the actual command. So that's one way, because a rollback of an empty one always works. So that's a trick you can do. The alternative is you go directly manually into the things log and you remove the article status here one. So this is the one that is now not migrated anymore. And if we now go into status, you see that it's down. And if we migrate, it actually runs the database migration. So that's pretty handy. Okay. And let's look into an actual controller on these. So here we have, oh, I need to go into source controller, articles controller. So in this articles controller, we have the basic CRUD action available. It should already give us the correct article, yeah, also the correct type. And if you look at what kind of properties are available, article, it kind of baked already title, content. What it doesn't have is status. You can see that. That is because we also didn't run the IdeHelper yet to actually update the annotations, for example, on the entity article. So here we have all the fields available, but they are not really, in there yet. By the way, I usually use ID false and true. This way, the primary key is protected, but the other fields are automatically added when you add a new field. Oftentimes here it leads to issues because you don't see it, and then something doesn't get saved silently, and that can usually create more trouble than it's worth. And this is protection enough for any exposed field that you don't want to, like a password as well. You set it manually to false, and the other fields will be just fine for patching. So the field here is missing, and for that we can run the IdeHelper. So bin cake annotate. Or if you want to be sure to not do anything or break anything, you can do a -d for dry run. So if we look here, it will add some interesting. Yeah, it will add some app view stuff. Didn't run it apparently before, as well as adding the status. It also fixes up somehow these iterates here. I think that's a config issue. I will probably have to tweak the IdeHelper to use the new syntax instead of the old one, because it seems to use app model entity article, and that is not exactly what we want to use. Let me see if I can find them. App custom. Ah, yeah, I found it. Okay, so let's go into our configs, and there we can go into app custom. So, cool. Objects, yeah, that should work. Let's see. Does it still create the same things? Okay. Well, for now, we can continue. We can fix it later. So if it's okay, we can annotate. And also, if you run it again, you will see nothing happens. So they're added only once if needed. If we go into the article, we can see that there is now the status field. So whenever you are referring that in any point, you have now autocomplete on it. And also PHP stand will know that it's an int. So you can see here it's int. So whenever you use it somewhere, like an array or in other wrong ways, it would actually alert you. So that's really, really helpful to have the IdeHelper always autocomplete everything. So the same applies to adding plugins. So if we are in the plugins, we actually add now via plugins here, so we don't need that. But adding helpers, adding components. So if we're in the app view, here you can see that we're initializing the UI for Bootstrap, which nothing else than adding helpers here. But we can also manually do here add helper calls, as you know. And here we can autocomplete. So if we know we're going to use any kind of helper, we can quickly get the list from here, including the plugin syntax, so the dot syntax in here. That's really useful. And after that, you will, of course, see, I'm just doing a driver now, that it will usually add the annotation on top automatically. And this annotation on top is super important for the templates to work properly, because if you look into any template now for the articles that we created, let's go into templates, articles, index. This is the line that is responsible for it to work. So we have the app view annotated as this. And through this, we can actually now have the helper calls completely annotated here. Yeah. So if I want to add another link here for some reason, echo this, you see now that the available helpers, Bootstrap, paginator, I think was it, yeah. So there are different helpers available, and we can actually use the autocomplete now, link from path. Link from path is pretty nice because it allows us to use the precompiled routes that you've seen earlier. I need to finish closing. So title, some title, and here you can see that autocomplete should actually work because of our IdeHelper. So here, if you're lazy, you can just select one of those existing routes, index, edit, delete, and it would just use them. So these are the string shortcuts to the verbose array syntax that you usually see down here. So this can be quite useful in some cases where you're building a lot of arrays, links from these path elements. So do we have, sometimes we also have autocomplete on sort, but probably not because of the paginator being now not the core paginator, but the Bootstrap paginator. So normally you have here autocomplete. We can rewire that through some configuration. That's fine. What else do we have? Yeah, usually we even have autocomplete on these elements. So if it's set up, of course. I'm not sure if __. I think only the D domain is set up. Interesting. Okay, because you can also have autocomplete on all of the possible strings that are translated. Maybe that's also because we didn't extract them yet, so it doesn't have them in the resources. Yeah, so we first need to actually extract those, and then once they're in here, you have autocomplete on every little string. So that is also nice. What else can I showcase in terms of tips and tricks? So I personally always make my own bake template that I can use, which has like already here some icons, using the Bootstrap layout, using no ID in the front because the ID is kind of not necessary. The title, also the display field, is usually already linked, so we can drop the view here and directly make it as clickable. So all of these things usually I have in a custom template that I'm using that is Bootstrap 5 enhanced, compatible. So that's pretty neat. If you have other composer commands, you can add them in here. in my case, I'm using, if you're wondering, I'm using Composer assets to build the assets. So whatever you do, you can use Bower, you can use NPM, you can use Grunt and other logic. So this is just a very simple setup. That's why it uses just npm minus npm I install and uses a simple packages JSON with only these three in here. And if you want to actually have those available, you can do Composer assets, and there you go. And now they're installed. So this way you have whatever assets you need, in this case even icons, different icons available that you can use in your project. We can of course test this. I made a test site for this, which is in the pages section, bootstrap test. So pages bootstrap minus test. Yeah. And you can see the grid column works, and here is a font awesome icon. It's a bit small here on the side for some reason, because I think it's mixed still with the millisecond, the default template. We don't have a concrete own layout yet for it, but we can see that the icons are working, and this is a font awesome icon. Here, font awesome, FA stop circle. All right, so I think this already helps you to find quite a bit of usefulness in how to set up, how to run a very basic CRUD application, writing, creating database tables, baking those controller models and views. Have all of that available right away in your source code here. So I didn't show you the table, but it's normal with all the validation that it kind of guessed from its defaults. And in the templates, articles, also the articles are quite default, I would say. Yeah, all right. I think with that, we are at the end of this first tutorial. If you are doing this for the first time, let me know if I missed anything that might be valuable to actually explain or to showcase. Yeah, and I will think about some new topics to build up on this, what we just did. Thank you very much.